It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Purple Daily, presented by Surly Brewing Company.
How about Purple Access, actually, presented by our friends, of course, Surly Brewing Company, Surly Furious, the best IPA around, and also by our friends at TCL TV. Enjoy more with TCL. Hopefully, you'll be watching the playoff games this weekend, not involving the Vikings, of course, on the TCL TV. Zolgad, Star Tribune sports columnist, and my buddy Chip Scoggins, executive producer Declan Goff, here to talk Vikings, Purple Access. And Chipper, I'll just start you off with this. Your unvarnished thoughts so far on the GM and coaching search, which has been going on all week long via Zoom.
Yeah, I know when they started out, Mark Wolf said that they were going to, hire the GM first and then the coach, which makes sense. And I think when they started interviewing head coaches too, I think that may confuse some people before you'd had a GM. But I think it's probably the right strategy. And then my hunch is you whittle that head coaching list down to whatever the number is, let's say 4 or 5 or even less, and then present them, to the GM. And you could always, add after you hire a new GM too, if that person has some input and say, hey, let's look at this. So it's definitely a wide net. I like the fact that, we always, the saying is you hire your opposite. And so everybody just assumed, they're getting a young offensive guy. And they may wind up with that, but I like the fact that they're talking to even defensive guys. Just because Zimmer was, that shouldn't preclude him from interviewing defensive head coaches too. So it seems like a pretty wide net that they're casting on both jobs.
So when it comes to the GM's names or the candidates for that job, Chipper, we obviously don't know a lot about the people because they're not like coaches. There's not a lot out there. But I will ask you this. What would you like to see in that position? Like what type of person, what type of skill set? Because I feel like the GM job in all sports is really changing because it used to be, I used to scout. Now I don't scout, but I still really do. What do you think are the most important qualities in 2022 for this job that the GM can have?
I would say adaptability, that you're willing to change as the game changes and not just be stuck in, well, this is how we always done it. And This is the way I do it. And this is the formula I used 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I cut into the business and I learned under this guy. I think anyone who is open-minded to change, to the trends in the game, to analytics, the way the game's shifting, that says, hey, we have to, we may have to reinvent ourselves some. And maybe not reinvent, but just do things differently than what we've done in the past. So I think someone has that ability to be adaptable and willing to, you have your base principles and all that, but just be willing to kind of adjust to the way the game adjusts. Because look at how the football, probably more than any sport, basketball's really changed too with the way the 3-point shot has come into it. But just the way the game is played and you have to be able to adjust as this game adjusts. And so I think I don't care about young, old, age, that doesn't really bother me, but it's just the mindset of you're going to be in tune with how the game is being played and scouted and all that.
Yeah. And I hope that so in doing this, I don't want them to be necessarily trying to find the opposite of Rick.
Correct.
But I want them to find, because my fear, and Chip, we've seen this both in pro and college, we got to hire the opposite of the old GM or old coach. Yeah. And I totally get that. But sometimes that can mean, well, just because this person is the opposite, they're the right person. I think what this committee that is conducting these Zoom interviews has to be doing, the foremost thing is not trying to find a person that's different than Rick, but trying to find a person that you can clearly see through this process gets it and gets where the sport is going. Because I'm with you. The evolution in the sport is huge, and it's in the process. Like, it's not done yet. And so if you're just saying, well, Rick did these 5 things poorly, and we want to find now, you do have to find a person that can find a quarterback. But I also want you to find a person that you actually think is good, as opposed to just the 180 of Rick Spielman.
Although I will say, they should ask him in the interview process of, what's your philosophy on trading back in the draft? We don't need that. We don't need another. I got to get 25 picks in the draft to, the more swings and misses.
You don't want to. What's wrong with that?
Drove me.
What's wrong with fifth round picks? I think it drove Zimmer crazy too.
It drove me crazy.
I think we're finding out now that drove Mike absolutely up the wall.
I know.
Gotta bail back, Mike.
I know.
I don't disagree.
I mean, it kind of became his Trader Rick, his persona. But no. I mean, obviously, I mean, part of that is you're going to have to find someone that understands or has a process in identifying and developing a quarterback. I mean, because that's what this league is, right? I mean, you got to have that guy, and so I mean, that's a big part of the conversation. But yeah, I mean, to go and say, this is what we had, now let's go hire the exact opposite, you're going to put yourself in a bad spot by just taking that. And I don't think they're doing that. I mean, they're obviously they're smarter than that, right? They're not just going to say, well, let's just hire a young offensive guy,
But you can get fooled sometimes. Like, they're definitely smarter than that. I just don't want them to get blinded by a mission that appears smart.
Well, and it's the thing I'm curious about, Judd, and this will come in after fact, is Mark Wilf talked about they had a lot of smart people inside the organization that they're taking their cues from, who they're listening to, both business and football. Like, how big is that committee, and how many cooks are going to be in the kitchen when they come in, or opinions are there going to be in terms of reaching a consensus on who they want? Because if you have, let's say, 6 people, 7 people, whatever the number is, they're not all going to like the same person, same coach and same GM equally. 100%. And so do the Wilfs, who has the loudest voice with the Wilfs in terms of this is who they want to hire?
So we actually had this discussion with Doogie on the Scoops today as well. And I've got 7 names of people in that room. The Wilfs, which clearly they have to be. I totally get that. The Wilfs, Rob Brzezinski, I believe Jamal Stevenson's involved. Ryan Munnins, both football guys, both good football guys involved.
Andrew Miller
and Ann Doppner, who was Brzezinski's right-hand assistant and might have been promoted out of that job, but she's been around, and I think she's basically been around the game. Exactly right. So at least 7, but you bring up a great point. Who's going to want what, and who's going to push for what? And do the Wilfs have those people in the room because they truly value what they bring, or is it so big because they're concerned about their own ability? Like, there's a big difference there between, you guys all deserve to be here, and, well, we'd sort of like to pin the blame if this doesn't go well on somebody else.
Well, that, but also it might just be them. And I don't mind this necessarily. But them saying, basically, we don't know what we don't know on some of this stuff. And maybe, I mean, because are they going to know every football question? Now, they can ask the big picture because they've run businesses, and that's, essentially what that person is going to be doing, the GM. But when they're asking them specifics about roster construction and management and all that, are they going to know, like, the right questions to ask and what to dig for there? Probably not, and so that's where you lean on, Ryan and Jamal Stevens and Brzezinski that have been more the football side of it. But it's a lot of voices.
Yeah.
It is a lot of voices. And so it'd be curious to see, because I assume after they finish these Zoom calls with them, they go around the room and get everybody's thoughts and kind of start ranking these these are, my understanding, these are virtual interviews, right, Judd? Are they going to narrow that list to 2 or 3 and then bring those people to town? That would be this, so this is probably going to stretch into next week, I would assume. But it's I'm just, once it's done, I'll be curious to, and I don't know that Mark Wolf or Ziggy's going to give us the lowdown on how everything went, but if it does come out, like how they arrived at the decision.
You're exactly right. That's been my main point is what are they doing? Like what are the questions? Who's asking what? And yeah, we just don't know. And look, I understand the GM is their thing. Like they've got to do that.
Yes.
The coach thing, I'd love to know the questions being asked because there's nobody in that room there that I totally trust from a coaching standpoint of this is the guy. The GM thing I'm on board with. I think 7 cooks in the kitchen's a lot, but
yeah,
you bring up really good questions that I've asked as well. And we just don't know.
Do you think they're asking the GM about the coaches they're interviewing?
I would hope so.
They have to be. When you're doing those, like, hey, this is the list of coaches that we're interviewing as well. Thoughts on that list? Is there somebody else we should be interviewing? I'd be curious to see.
I would hope so. Wouldn't you?
Because like, hey, this is what you're gonna be hiring. And I think it's probably gonna be the same thing, right? I mean, I'm sure they can weed out some of the coaches that just don't impress them, and then present to the GM. Hey, here's 4 that really stood out of the how many they interviewed? 7, 8 coaches?
8 right now.
Yeah, 8.
Raheem Morris, 8.
Yeah, here's 4 that really blew us away and stood out. Now let's go deeper on that.
And if the GM says, hold on a second here, guy X has not gotten a job yet, and I like guy X, I think that they have to be adaptable enough to say, oh yeah, no question about it. Like this is not destined to fail if they're doing it right.
Correct.
So like, it's not like, oh my God, but if they are asking coaches about philosophy on things as far as game situations go, then I'm out. But if they're just trying to get a feel for the person, okay, I sort of get that.
Well, and it's interesting too that when we wonder like what are the Wills asking about, we know what they're asking about because the GM in particular, based on the story that Ben Gessling had in our paper, and then Deion Sanders saying that he had talked to Zimmer and him and Spillman hadn't talked in months. And then, oh, by the way, Mark Wilf on that Zoom call mentioning communication and collaboration like 17 times. I guarantee you that's a big part of what the Wills are trying to pull at, right? Hey, how would you work with this? How would you handle this? How, that is going to be a big point for them that there's not the dysfunction apparently that we sort of knew about, but not the depths of it.
Right.
Behind the scenes.
Right. What's interesting about your point there, though, Chipper, is the fact that collaboration and communication is absolutely key to a certain point, but collaboration has to end at some point as well because it's pro sports. So like there's I get where they're going with this. But you can't be like, oh, the whole building's involved, So there's a line to be drawn here, and again, we don't know if they know where that line is. And also, the thing with Rick and Mike is, and look, it was pretty crystal clear. It went sideways. Like at one time, it was probably pretty good, and it went sideways. So like, you can't be totally afraid to. I wouldn't look back on 2015 and say, well, now we see what was screwed up there too.
No. It was later.
You gotta go through that and vet it. And in these leagues, if you leave a duo together for a long time, especially football, it's eventually going to run its course.
Well, that's the thing is like early on, I don't think there's any doubt that these guys were joined at the hip and they probably had arguments or whatever, but not to where they weren't talking to each other and was taking shots at each other and, as Zimmer started doing. And so, yeah, you're right. 8 years in the NFL together, it's a long time. You're bound. And then, it first to me jumped out training camp this past season when Mike started taking some shots about the roster. That's when you're like, there's trouble in paradise.
And the GM and coach are always eventually going to have a slightly, if not a big difference in agenda, but that's what makes the GM job so crucial is so the temptation should not be to say, oh, you know what? We need a coach who's going to have control of the roster like Brad Childress did. That's the worst thing because that guy's agenda is always short-term. So like the butting of heads is necessary
Yeah.
So like that's where it gets to be a very interesting discussion and dynamic, because you want that. You want them talking, but like to think that these two are going to be thick as thieves is that's not going to happen. That shouldn't happen.
Well, no, because by definition, there's going to be inherent friction because the GM has to take the long view, the coach has to take the short view.
Correct.
Like a coach can't worry about 5 years out. He has to he has to win this year, and so whatever he's always going to want, whatever is going to help him this year. Well, the GM can't play that card. I mean, that's and so you're always going to have some healthy friction where you're like, hey, I'd love to, but I got the salary cap and I got to think about 3 years down the line and this guy's contract. And so love you, Zim, but we can't have this, but it can't reach the point where you're not talking. Right. And that's it. So it went too far.
Yeah. So on Saturday of last week, 7 coaching candidate names leaked out. They've started talking to a few. I'm going to run through that list. And Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator for the Rams, was added to the list, I believe, yesterday. So it's at 8.
Correct.
Now.
Yeah.
Todd Bowles, who is the Bucs DC. Jonathan Gannon, who was here, I think, is an assistant secondary coach to Jerry Gray for a few years. The Philadelphia Eagles DC. Nathaniel Hackett, the Packers OC, who does not call plays but has previously, and they talked to him on Sunday. Kellen Moore, the Cowboys OC, who we can certainly talk about. He sat down with them on Wednesday. Kevin O'Connell, who is the OC for the Rams, but obviously does not call plays.
Yeah.
Dan Quinn, who also talked to them on Wednesday, the Cowboys DC and the former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. And DeMeco Ryans, who is San Francisco's DC and a rising young coaching potential star.
Yeah.
Who do you like? Who don't you like? And what intrigued you about this list of now 8 with Raheem Morris added?
Yeah, the Kellen Moore thing after the debacle the other night, I think.
Don't upset our guy Declan.
That one. I know it's one play, but that would make me nervous. I
made us all nervous.
Yeah. I've heard great things about Hackett.
Mm-hmm.
Just his personality. Obviously, the one thing in there is you got one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. That how much is him? How much is Aaron Rodgers? DeMeco Ryans is interesting. Todd Bowles to me is interesting. I think Raheem Morris is a dynamic personality, right? Didn't he? He's a guy that guys.
I like him a lot. Yes.
Yeah, he has kind of that presence.
He's got the Tomlin thing.
Yeah,
he's got that Tomlin presence.
Yeah, O'Connell, I don't know anything about.
Yeah,
and that one would make me nervous. I just don't know any. Dan Quinn, I think I saw the quote from. No, who was it? Was it somebody had favorable things to say about Dan Quinn, and then I can't remember who it was. I don't know. That one, he doesn't do a lot for me, but I mean, he has been a head coach.
I like Morris more.
I like Raheem Morris more.
That was where I felt.
Yeah, so I think Gannon, I know he coached here, but I don't know much about him at all, so I can't really speak. But I would say Todd Bowles, Raheem Morris, DeMeco Ryans, and Hackett. Those 4 kind of for different reasons. And you have offensive and defense guys in there. I mean, it's I know people are stuck on, we had a defense coach, now we got to get an offense coach. And I don't buy it. Get a great offensive coordinator and let him be an offense coordinator. To me, it was more about the philosophy that Mike Zimmer had and really being restrictive on that and giving it to a coordinator who was overmatched by the job. So I don't worry about the offense defense thing. Just get the right personality, the right guy who can manage a game. If he's offense defense, I don't really care. Just hire good coaches under him.
I am 1000% on board with that. And the thing too is, and Mike, because Mike was so focused on his defense, it became difficult to separate this. But Chip, get a coach who also cares about both sides. So like he's not one side. And the other thing is, and this would be absolutely instrumental, I need a head coach who's going to care a lot about his quarterback. I don't care where the coach's training is. I don't care if it's I need a coach who is going to not 4 years in say, I don't really like the quarterback, but he's begging me to talk to him, so I'll do it now. So like because Mike was so defense first, it almost became this whole thing of, well, you're going to have to pick sides. I don't want that. I don't want to pick sides. I want you to care about the quarterback, and I want you to care about the roster, the entire team. And then to what you're saying, the OC and the DC can do a ton of work there. But if you're going to come in and say, all I care about is offense, and I'm going to be like, we saw that already. Don't need that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it created too much of a us versus them, or us and them in the team. And you just can't have that. And agree. I mean, if it's a defense guy, have a great relationship with your quarterback. Here's the thing: maybe don't call plays for defenses. Leave that to someone else. And I know it's a control thing, and I know they're control freaks, and it's something that a lot of these guys were coordinators, and they just say, "Hey, I want to maintain that because it's part of what I'm good at, or whatever." Maybe think about letting your coordinators handle that, and you handle the game management and being on top of the whole thing.
Yes,
I know it's a novel idea, but I just think it's like if I was the Wilfs, I would be excited by this opportunity to find, someone that you feel like is going to be coming with a lot of enthusiasm and just fresh perspective and energize your locker room. And clearly, based on some of the comments we've heard, I think the locker room got beat down by the message and the tone and the way it was delivered. And so I think a new voice, and particularly if it's someone with a big presence like a Raheem Morris or I don't know these other guys' personalities, but I think I've heard that about Raheem Morris. I think that'll energize the players too.
Absolutely.
I think it'll be.
I think there's a couple of things that can be learned here also from the recent GM or Pobo searches by the Wolves and Wild, Chip. One is this one. As far as the committee goes in trying to choose probably way more the GM than the coach, don't get fooled. So you've got to do background work, which I hope that they, and I'm talking about high level background work.
FBI,
You know what? There are former FBI executives employed by sports teams. I would hire one. I would dig through every bit of a
trash cans.
I'd be going through everything. Don't call the candidate's mom. Hey, is Tommy a good kid?
He's the greatest guy ever.
I love him. And don't call the employer that the guy just worked for and trust him, because the first thing that employers do is like, oh, Chip Scoggins is the best. He's the best we've ever had. It's like, I can't wait to get rid of Chip. So that's the first thing. Because Gerson fooled him. Yeah. And look, Gerson built a pretty nice roster. I'm not ripping that, but he fooled him personality wise.
Yeah. And the way he managed the way he conducted.
Absolutely. The second
treated people.
The second thing with the Wild, treat people both ways, Chip.
I shouldn't have turned on my microphone.
Right. Which side you talking about here? You talking about the fellow employees or the fellow employee? As far as the Wild goes, I think that we can learn something from what Leopold did. And this is why I'm curious about what Mark Wilf said when he announced the firings of Rick and Mike. Mark Wilf said, I believe the term was, we expect to be super competitive in 2022. Leopold's biggest mistake when he fired Chuck, not Paul Fenton, was just needs a tweak.
Tweaks. Right there. Tweaks. Yeah.
And Billy Guerin had to not only clean up some of Fenton's mess, but I think he had to sit down with Craig and have a come to Jesus and say, okay, we don't have to be bad for a long time, but this ain't tweaks. This is major change. So I hope that they don't buy the GM candidates being like, Mark, Ziggy, everybody, I'm on the same page. Just a few tweaks and we can be super competitive. So those to me are very important lessons that can be learned from mistakes and then what was resolved from the Wolves and Wild.
Yeah, and I wrote about that today in context of the Cousins and the three options that they have with him, in that, Mark's comments on that Zoom was, when he's asked about a rebuild, he's like, whoa, no, I don't even want to go there. I don't even want to talk about rebuild. And I understand, no owner wants to do that. But what Leopold did with the Wild, that's, with Billy, unlike what he did with Fenton, was he allowed the guy to come in unemotional, unbiased, really just take this roster and do what you think needs to be done, and we're just going to let you do it. And it's like, okay, I'm going to take this stick of dynamite and put it on your tweaks, Yeah. And that's what this roster needs, that somebody come in and say, I don't really have any history with these players. I don't know what they mean to you. I don't know what they mean to this franchise. I can just tell you black and white. Here's what they make. Here's what the production is. Here's where we need to go. And I don't know if the Wilfs, because they are fans and they want to win, are at that point. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if they, you'll know by their moves, right? Because I think there's probably some veterans that have meant a lot to the organization that you're going to have to make tough decisions on financially, right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to move it forward. And so I'm sure that's part of that's got to be part of the interview process. If I'm a GM, I'm like, okay, now what am I going to be allowed to do? And what's your view of this roster? Because I want to share my view of the roster.
Absolutely. And that's where, though, if you are the GM candidate, you've got to tell the truth. Well, like this is going to sound weird, but your most important goal should not be getting the job. It should be telling them what you're going to do. But you know what? Yeah. I think that Craig could teach the Wilfs an important lesson and say, I could have saved myself a lot of trouble.
A couple years.
Because my guess is when Bill Guerin talked to them at the same time Fenton did, he probably told the truth. Like, I don't think he's a BS guy. I think Bill probably said, okay, we got some things here. And Craig's probably like, well, hold on a second. Do we have to? Bill might have said, yes, we do.
Yeah. And how much of that too is owners like thinking, I got to sell tickets and we got fans coming. And if I say rebuild, then everybody thinks that's, oh my gosh, they're going to be a terrible team. And why do I need to, they have to consider the business part of it too, more so than, or as much as, roster construction, right? I mean, they're thinking about putting people in your arenas. And so I'm sure Craig was like, we've been a playoff team and I want to stay off playoff team. Can we just do this on the fly? And it's like, nah, not really.
Right.
I mean,
right.
So, I don't, it'd be interesting to see if the Wilfs talk to other owners, about, hey, how did you handle certain, circumstances? I mean, I'm sure it would be probably a productive conversation to have with Leopold about, hey, you went through this and what did you learn? What would you have done differently, first time around? Because I think we're both big fans of Billy Guerin. I think what he's doing,
all three of us are.
And Declan too. Yeah, I mean, I just think I think he's a very good GM. And
he's what you need.
This is what the Vikings need right now: a strong GM who's unemotional about their roster and who's not scared to make that hard decision if he thinks it's gonna. And Billy made some. The Ryan Suter one. People are like, "What in the world?" Mm-hmm. Is the GM that comes in the Vikings? Is he going to make one of those moves where you're like, boy, I don't know about this one. This just seems short-sighted. Hey, what Garrett says is what we have to do.
Right. Well, and this goes down such an intriguing path because it's not just about the on the ice or on the field product. It's about the locker room. And so like Bill Guerin looked and saw what we all saw, which is this thing has to be shaken up. The Vikings, I don't know if they have the culture that the Wild had devolved to, but they need a shakeup. Like they are stale, and you can't just say GM and coach are new, so go to it. They've got players that need to be replaced because of age and because it's stale.
Yeah, and like I with the Wild, I thought they had clearly there was issues.
I do too.
Chemistry, and I think that's been beaten, talked about a lot.
Yep.
I don't know that there's that in the Vikings. Now you could say, have some of these guys, are they playing up to their contract? Are they going to fall off the cliff type thing? In the NFL, which what Belichick has done and the Patriots have done, just been genius of, they get rid of a guy a year too early versus a year too late. And their core, especially on defense, Harrison, Kendricks. I mean, somebody's telling me the other day that Danielle Hunter's going to be 28. Is he that old already? Is that right?
28. That's correct.
Gosh, feels like he should be like
7 games in 2. 7 games in 2 years, Chip.
Yeah, and so these guys are not going to be at that level,
correct,
for eternity. And so the new GM's going to have to come in and look at these guys who are your stars now and your best players and say, where is the cliff at? And we have to figure that out.
And we both learned this too. And it might not be fair, but it's football. We both learned that because this team in 17 had chemistry that was great. Mm-hmm. Now that's pre-Kirk, but I mean Harrison and Anthony Barr and all those guys, the chemistry was beyond a shadow of a doubt fantastic. But what did we learn from 9 to 10? The longer that you try to keep the chemistry experiment going, the more it sours. And so it might not be fair, but to me, one of the many problems of the 2021 Vikings was they didn't play like a team. They didn't look like a team.
Yeah.
And so I am literally saying, I think that you need to make some substantial changes for change's sake.
Would argument be that they did that the coach had a big influence on that?
I think the locker room has to be. Yep. And I'm not saying everybody's gone, but I am saying I don't look at this team like Mark Wilf does and say, man, this team, if you had just replaced Mike, they're super competitive. They might be different, but I don't think that's fair. Mike deserves blame, but I'm going to draw a line too. Like, and Ben's story was really good and a great read. The one problem, and Chip, we both written the same type of story before. The one problem with that story is the reader and fan just thinks, oh, Mike was the whole problem. Mike was a big part of the problem, but there's problems that go beyond Mike.
Yeah. I mean, the coaching, obviously that was, but the problem I think the Wilfs are going to have is that they're going to look at this roster and it's like, well, wait a second. We have Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks, Danielle Hunter, some of the best players at their positions in the league. Well, this team should be good. It should be good. Well, your secondaries, your cornerback situations is in shambles. Your defensive line, you spent money on guys that didn't produce. Your offensive line interior is still a disaster. And so you're going to have to spend a lot of money to fix the defense, to fix the offensive line interior. Oh, by the way, Justin Jefferson's going to get a gigantic contract here after next year.
Yep.
And so there's a tug of war going on where you look at their stars and you're like, man, they got some of the brightest players at their positions. But that's 5 or 6. You have 53. That's you have to worry about.
Yeah.
And I think you need to look at the 53 and not get consumed with the 5 or 6 and fool yourself into thinking we're going to be super competitive.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you are currently $12+ million.
$11 million.
Over the So that's a problem there too. So it's going to be that. That's why I keep saying if the GM says, "Oh, look, you guys got play," I can come in and just tweak things here and there. I'd say, "See ya, bye, bang, you're done."
Yeah.
I want to hear a plan, and that plan needs to involve some details that if I own the team, I probably don't like. But I need to hear.
Yeah. I assume there's going to be a veteran that gets released that you just,
or two
that maybe surprises.
If Kirk does not go, you're going to have to make some substantial moves.
Well, even if you restructure him, I think you're going to have to make some substantial ones. Correct?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I think if they say we want Kirk, like Kirk gives us our best chance. If I'm the candidate for the GM job, I tell them, okay, but we're keeping that contract. I'm not going to extend him.
Yeah.
But if you do that, go through the exercise of trying to get that cash back to get below the cap. It's a very, very difficult exercise to complete.
And I would need Rob Brzezinski to explain this, but they got to do something with the deal. Obviously, I mean that's
do a balloon payment in March.
That is number 2 on the agenda item is figure out what you're doing with him.
Yep. All right, sir. I appreciate it. Hopefully by the time that we talk next Thursday, there will at least be a GM in place so we can start to dissect a person. We barely know, Chipper. Thank you. Oh, wait. Hold on a second here.
Yeah.
Chip Scoggins. I almost forgot. Chip Scoggins, what do you need to do this week before we hit the football games on Saturday and Sunday?
Well, you better load up on Surly Furious. That's for darn sure, right? Get to your local liquor store or your grocery store. Do not come up short. That is that's the worst thing you do. Do not come over plan.
Yep.
Make sure you have enough and don't come up short.
We conducted one Zoom. That's what Chip and I did, because we were like, who can run our franchise? Who can come in here? And one Zoom, we made our decision. Surly Furious IPA. Now I'll talk to you next week, Chip.
See you.
Bye.